Average Dude has something to say about...
Everybody, welcome back. It's been a while, and there's been so many bad things going on in the world. I could talk about so many things. I don't want to go that route right now. I think it's time to do something a little different, and I've been wanting to do this for quite a while. Discuss the decades that have gone by. Now, I'll start with, I can't really speak about decades that I have not experienced, prior to when I was born, but I can talk about the decades, well, the ones that I've actually experienced, and that would start with the 70s. Yeah, I mean, I'm in my 40s right now, and a lot of people now, there are more and more people that have no experience of the 70s, or were way too young to have any kind of lasting memory of it. And boy, do I ever remember the 70s. This shirt, yeah, go ahead and get a laugh out of this thing. I picked it because to honor the 70s, this is probably something that you would have seen for the 70s, because people were outdoors a lot, and I'll talk about that later. But yeah, let's talk about the styles of the 1970s. Oh! Whoa, were they bad? Oh, the clothes, bell bottoms, I mean the ugliest colors in the world. And it wasn't just the clothes. The buildings, homes, the decor, the styles were atrocious. The ugliest wallpaper. You can always tell when you're in an older house where you had people in that around the 1970s. Because you will see the ugliest wallpaper on the face of God's green earth. You will see these ridiculous flower patterns with greens, orange, yellow, and brown. I want you to think about that. A room with the colors, solid colors no less, green, yellow, orange, and brown on the walls. You had them on... The kitchen countertops were those, that really ugly orange or yellow or what have you. You had it all over the place. The styles were... When I think of the 70s, I remember, the Brady Bunch. Now, the Brady Bunch, when you see that house and you think, oh, that's what was going on back then, that was very fancy. What you had in your regular, average, everyday United States home wasn't nearly that nice looking, because they had a lot of stone walls with the stone paneling, a lot of wood paneling back then. Oh my goodness, you saw wood paneling, the stuff that's about yay thick. To cover the walls. You had wood paneling all over the place back in the 70s. But then wood was such a big deal back then. You didn't have plastic, at least not nearly as much as you do today. Plastic's all over the place. Things were made of wood. Wooden plates, wooden bowls, wooden utensils for the kitchen. You had, for heaven's sakes, even the video game consoles of the late 70s, the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision, they had the wood paneling too. That's what it was like back then. A whole lot of wood paneling with that shellac, that stain, that dark stain on the wood to make it look nice. You had a lot of that back then because the 70s was all about nature and a natural look, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but oh my goodness gracious. Where do I begin when it comes to the shag carpet that was around at the time? The ugliest carpet in the world. If you're lucky, most of the buildings that you're in anymore, the old homes, will have ripped and pulled that off long ago. When you were out and about, I mentioned the Atari and the Intellivision, the game consoles, the video games. Prior to the video games that we tend to remember, like the Space Invaders and all that, that was the later 70s. The bulk of the 70s, when you went to places like the bowling alley, or if you went to, people were roller skating a whole bunch, or just at some type of common area in a building where you had, the concession stand and whatnot, you saw your jukebox, because they still had jukebox playing the records, the little 45s. You had your foosball tables. You also had pinball machines. Oh yeah, you had your pinball wizards. Jukebox hero. Yeah, let's talk about the music back then. You had the 70s was that light rock. It was multiple male vocal part harmonies. So like Chicago, Foreigner comes to mind. I just said Jukebox Hero. Boston, More Than a Feeling. The Eagles, for heaven's sakes, Hotel California, Toto. Down in Africa, Steely Dan. Okay, if any of you watching this remember Steely Dan, chances are you were alive during the 70s. Back, Jack, do it again. Yeah, I know. Bear with me in my voice, singing along with the really old 70s rock. Oh, brings back good memories. Disco. Yeah, I remember disco. How could you not remember disco if you were alive back then? Now I was younger. I wasn't, old. I wasn't a teenager back then, or old, that old. So I wasn't at the clubs dancing around, with everyone. I was a kid. But I remember our family. We had this Mickey Mouse disco record, and it had on the cover it showed Disky in that stereotypical John Travolta suit with the white vest and striking that disco pose. It was like, a Mickey Mouse disco record. So yeah, I definitely remember disco. How could you not? Staying alive, staying alive. Oh, plenty of Bee Gees. It was a time for nature. That's the one thing about the 70s that, okay, the bad styles aside, it was all about doing things outside. The 70s was not a decade where you sat on your butt in front of a TV all day. You were outdoors a lot. If you were swimming, you weren't necessarily swimming in a pool with chlorine. You were swimming in fresh water, a pond or a lake. You were having fish, swimming around in there, occasionally bumping into you, nipping your feet or stuff like that. And as a kid, you'd be a little freaked out, because you look down there, you're treading water. You can't see through that water. When you're at your regular community pool with chlorine, you can see down there. You can't do that with ponds and lakes and whatnot. So it was definitely a different time. And those styles of those swimsuits, those really solid blue. I had a pair of solid blue, just very in-your-face blue swimsuits as a kid, and that had a really solid red, vertical band to each side. Not one of those in-between colors. Solid blue, solid red. Your stereotypical solid blue, because that's what they were. They were very big, bold colors. Really ugly. But you were outside a whole lot. Hiking, a lot of hiking, canoeing, a lot of canoeing. Being tipped over in the canoe and dunking in the water and getting yourself back out, back into the canoe. A whole lot of cookouts. Oh, there were so many cookouts. And back then, most people did not have their own personal, portable grill to bring to the campsite to grill things outdoors. That was very rare. If somebody had their own little, propane bit, a little grill about this size, they were like rectangular, you were rich and well off, because most of us, you just brought your charcoal bags with charcoal, the lighter fluid and whatnot, and you used, if you've ever been to those campsites, you'll see they're rarely used, those big metal sticks with the, charcoal grills out there for the community to use. People used to do that. I don't see anybody doing that anymore at campgrounds. Of course, I hardly see anybody going to the campgrounds anymore. Campgrounds used to be full. You would have people at the parks having cookouts all the time. Burgers. Oh, put a slice of cheese on that thing. Oh, yeah, on a hot day. Can of soda, get the chips. Yes. Oh, man, camping. A whole lot of camping. And most people used their pickup trucks and would just sleep in the back portion or whatnot have you, or they would bring tents and their truck and their tents. That's what we did. We had a Dodge Sidewinder truck that had a full cab. One of those where the pickup truck had a cap on the back, but it was the tall kind, the kind that you could get in and stand up in. So people that had those tended to put like beds and stuff back there, and they would use their pickup trucks for camping. They may not have even needed a tent. But some people brought their tents. Now, the really well-to-do people, the camping regulars, would have their campers. And they would always seem to have these really ugly owl lantern lights, these string lights with these plastic owls with lights in them hanging around their campers. If you've ever seen them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, those were the regulars. Those were the ones that camped a lot. But they were so fun. Back then in the 70s, it was normal for people to just walk the campsite at night, and occasionally you would meet new people. Sit down, everybody had a bunch of lawn chairs and whatnot, and you'd have your sodas. The older people would have their beers and whatnot. And, oh, s'mores and sodas. Oh, yeah. You had a lot of outside pavilion concerts. If you went to a music concert, chances are it was in an outside pavilion, not necessarily indoors, although there were some. Most people did the outdoor. If you were at a campsite, they tended to have their own concerts. They'd have these evening campsite dance pavilion areas where they'd have dances. A lot of us who were kids during the 70s remember our first dances with, if you were a guy and she's a pretty girl, you got your first dance with a girl at a campsite evening dance, or girls vice versa with guys back then. That was normal. And of course the parents would be like, oh, isn't that cute? And if you were a kid, you're like, Mom, Dad, that kind of thing. Oh my goodness, where do I begin? I've already begun. So much was outdoors. Nature played such an integral role. And for those that did not experience the 70s, you just don't get it unless you have lived it. It's not like today. You were very physically active. It was very healthy. You were outdoors a lot, maybe a little too much. But even in the movies, they showed nature a whole bunch. You had comedies like Meatballs, the campsite comedy, and that was normal. But then you also had a lot of scary movies that dealt with nature, rather than, before Freddy Krueger and whatnot. You had Jaws. You had Grizzly, you had Orca, and God knows how many others. Those are the ones that I can think of, where the slasher movies were based upon nature, a predator, some type of an animal that could kill you or eat you. Nature was, you were supposed to be out in nature, but in the 70s, and this is the last decade that I ever remember being responsible like this, they made it very clear to the kids and adults that you were to be careful and you were to be safe, that nature was wonderful, but it was dangerous and you had to respect it. I mean, you were never supposed to go out walking in the woods at night. You could trip over something, twist, sprain, or break your ankle, or if you're in some areas that have like steep drop-off and ravines and stuff like that, in forest areas, you could fall and you could kill yourself. And that's not even talking about the predators that can hurt you. The 70s was very it's the last truly, genuinely responsible decade, healthy, responsible decade that I can think of. That's my memories of the 70s. I have a very warm, soft spot for the 70s and what I remember of it. Everybody, take care. For those of you that remember the 70s, feel free to comment on what you remember about it. Because, hey, I sure do. Take care.